Fletcher Baker that we have been connected with for some time. They sponsored the book Before the Hammer Falls, and they wrote a chapter in there on legal packs. And today we are talking about nightmares at auction. And David would certainly know some of these, especially from the solicitor side of the desk. Um, so let's. Have you got a scenario off the top of your head, David, that you want to share off the bat? Just to
Yeah, I've got several. I could go. How long have we got? Yeah,
we got an hour. Let's do this.
we've got an hour. Um, yeah, but do you know what, funny, when I was at one of the last boardrooms that you guys held, David Sanderman was there, and he gave some crazy stat about the amount of people that don't look at the legal packs before they're bidding at auction. I think he said, I can't remember exactly, but I think he said something like 40%
Yeah,
aren't
it was
aren't
40%.
even,
so high.
which is just a wild figure. For he was saying people treat it a bit like an Argos catalog, and they're just clicking through. So then, as a result of people not looking at legal packs, you you're going to encounter issues, and you're going to probably need someone like me along the way. But I had one recently. I don't know if I told you and Jay or mentioned this one to you before. But by the way, if I mention this story, because probably Jay or Piot will know or be able to guess the parties that are involved, please don't shout out the names, because then I'm going to be involved in litigation first thing on a Sunday morning. I'll keep it sort of vaguish, and I'll not mention any party names. But yeah, we had a we had a guy not too long ago who bought a property for about 3 million, just under 3 mil. It was a good property. It had a lot of development potential and all the rest of it. So the property itself looked really good. Um, the client bought it without running it by our team at all. He usually does. Some of them he'll run by. This one he just went and bought, um, and it was a nightmare. So he, first of all, the seller selling the property didn't own it. So straight away you got something that's going to give you some concern. So seller doesn't own the property, but he's got a share purchase agreement to buy the shares in the company that owns the property. So, and there was questions about the progress of that share purchase agreement. So, and issues around whether this person would even be able to sell the property he's selling, because he's basically marketing and putting it for auction when he didn't own it. But anyway, our client cracked on and paid the deposit, which was 5% at least up front. So that was about 150 grand. Um, but now the special conditions attached to this property were wild. They were just, first of all, the seller had the ability to bring forward the completion date at short notice. So what did the seller do? He brought forward the completion date at short notice. And bear in mind, you then have to foot up, what is it, almost 3 mil within a couple of days. Um, so, and this is an experience. This is someone that knows their way around the auction world, the seller. Um, so, serve that notice. Completion is brought forward. Client, there's an argument about some issues about whether there's good title and whether he can even transfer it. Immediately, so it's like, bring forward it to 11 o'clock on, let's say, the 25th of July. 11:03, they serve a notice to complete.
Oh, wow.
But the notice to complete, usually you guys will say it. Guess how many days was in the special conditions for the notice to complete?
1 day.
1 day. Yeah, 24 hours. 24 hours. So then you're left with 24 hours to find that money, or whilst at the same time there's all this litigation going on about the various issues, which I won't go into. But the 24 hours later, letter before action, forfeited the deposit of circa 150 grand, demanded payment of the additional 5% to make up the 10% deposit. So that gets you to about 300 grand. So demanded that to be paid within 24 hours, feeling which there was a threat to wind up the client's company, which also, this was a company with other assets as well. So threat to wind up the company. And then we're involved at this point, so we're sending letters back. But within 5 days, they serviced that demand to wind up the company. So this is all good. So then we end up issuing an application to restrain the presentation of the winding up petition. We're all down in the High Court. KC's involved. We happen to win and successfully restrain. You effectively get an injunction to prevent the winding up. We get our costs on an indemnity basis and all the rest of it. But there's still, that story isn't finished. I won't go into the whole thing, but that's as a result of something that looked really good in the catalogue. It looked like a brilliant purchase. But the special conditions were just fraught with danger. And I know I've seen special conditions recently as well, where, and you guys might know who this relates to, but where the seller can just rescind the contract for any reason at any point. And the difficulty, yes, and then what will happen is you get the seller will say, well, I'll go ahead with this if you give me an extra 20 grand, a day or two before.
Yeah, that's like the most annoying thing, because you go into an auction expecting you're gonna actually buy something and own it, but if there's no commitment on the other person's side, it's pointless. Like, it's actually a pointless thing for
it can become dangerous as well, because what if they've got that option, what some of them will do is they start marketing the property back in other auctions when you've entered into a contract to buy it. And then the risk is someone sees that and says, oh, you breached the contract. How are you trying to sell this to somebody else? And they terminate the contract, but then they've potentially repudiated the contract themselves. So could place themselves in breach, not realizing that actually the seller can do this contractually.
Wow.
Some light stories for the Sunday morning.
I know Jay has one. There's one that Jay sent to me. I know you'll remember this one, Jay or Piotr. I don't know which one of you it was, but there was a lady in auction who wouldn't put her hand down. I think wanting to buy up front.
I remember it was a short lease flat in Easton.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys sent it on to me, and I remember we got a report. Andrew Talbot's did a report, and I think the premium came out about 130 grand or something.
Yeah.
And I called her up, I spoke to her, I goes, look, oh no, I sent the report on, then called her, and she's like, oh no, sorry, David, you've got this all wrong, you're mistaken, and I bought the flat. I bought it at auction, so you're trying to tell me I have to pay another 130k. It's like, but it's mine already. I'm like, oh no. So this was a disaster. And then she started screaming at me. I'm like, it's not my fault. I'm sorry.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was a bad one, because I was still working for the auction house at the time, and I was at the contracts desk. I filled out the contract for her, and I had friendly conversation. I always talk to everyone like, "Why are you buying this? What are you going to do about it?" And I mentioned the short lease, and she didn't even acknowledge what I said. So I was like, "Okay, well, she clearly got her own plans, whatever." I said, "Do you have a solicitor?" She says, "No." I said, "Well, you need to I think you guys were sponsoring the room at the time." So we'll go and speak to these guys, because I know they have a couple of solicitors that are really very good with lease extensions, enfranchisement, landlord-tenant act stuff. And yeah, she called up the office a couple of times, really not a happy bunny, but just because, you don't know what you don't know. And she clearly just didn't have the comprehension that when a lease goes below a certain point, when that runs out, you no longer have that property. So
yeah, and the issue was, I think it was about 17 years remaining on that lease, and she just
it was
didn't.
very low.
Yeah, really low, and she didn't have the money then to finance it, so it became it became a mess very quickly.
Yeah, I
But yeah,
remember like once I was at auction house, one of the auctioneers at the back of the room, and someone was introduced to me because this lady wanted to buy a couple of houses in Hartlepool with like really high income. So I think £6,000 income per annum, 20k guide price. And she was like, yeah, I'm happy to buy. It's like 35, 40k. And I want to give it to my niece and my nephew as their kind of like, as a gift for to make their income, like just give them income. I'm like, don't do this. Like, just, I don't know, give them money, buy them a Ferrari, do whatever. It's gonna be money better spent than buying property in Hartlepool with probably some sort of fake tenancy or tenancy where you're just gonna have trouble. And it's pretty amazing, like how often people just go in with a certain kind of view what they want to achieve, but unless they know what they're buying and what's inside that legal pack, it could be such a different story.
do you know what? Those ones are some of those are a bit unique because what you'll have those for a period you had these like phantom tenancies for these
Yeah.
properties up north. So I think what they would do is just grab anybody from the pub or from wherever, get them to sign a tenancy agreement. So you would actually have in the legal pack a signed AST at like 700 quid a month. When then they get the keys and the property's empty. You got a misrepresentation claim and all the rest of it, but then you're bogged down in litigation. You probably just, be better off. You do your due diligence with some of those with exceptionally high yields up north.
Yeah,
It's definitely worth checking the tenancy profile.
So
nice.
it's one of
Well,
those things, like it's the easiest thing to solve because all you need to do is actually visit the property. Because if
Yeah,
you
yeah.
knock on the door and there's no one there, I mean, I know a lady. I think one auction she must have bought 5 or 6. And she went up and like 2 or 3 were decent. Two didn't like want to answer the door to her. It was just I don't know what it is in that area. They didn't want to kind of engage with her at all. But one, no one answered, so she knocked on the next door neighbour's door, and she said, "Oh yeah, that's been empty for about 3 years." And that's the one that she actually um, contested. And I think she got the contract unwound. So I think someone sent a rather strongly worded letter, basically saying this is clearly a misrepresentation and it's fraudulent misrepresentation. And the
Yeah.
client has, relied upon that, and it's, all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
the seller in that instance thought, well, give her back the deposit, try and get a tenant in there, and then resell it essentially. But
Yeah.
I heard a horror story fairly recently. We were, myself and Helen were judging the Property Investor Awards a couple of weeks ago,
Yeah.
and we were sat next to an auctioneer. I'll keep it ambiguous. First time I've actually met him in person. Genuinely seems like a really nice guy.
Really did, yeah.
Yeah, and we were just bitching and moaning, as is our want. You sit next to somebody that's in the same business as you, start talking shop. Just started talking about all the pet peeves and the hates that I have in the industry and all the terrible things that could be changed if people had an ounce of integrity and all that kind of stuff. And he said, "Well, there's a new trend with some buyers, a very particular class of buyer. They sold post auction a 3-bedroom terraced house somewhere in the southeast, and it was being sold with vacant possession. So the guy who bought it goes to the property with a locksmith, changes the locks, goes in, does a video walkthrough, takes loads of pictures, and then an hour later it's on another auctioneer's website. What he didn't realize is that the property wasn't vacant yet. It was just going to be vacant upon completion. So the family gets home after picking up their child from school, and realize that they can't get into the property because someone's changed the locks.
Oh.
so the auctioneers had to kind of scramble, try and get hold of this buyer, try and get hold of the other auctioneer, and they managed to get a locksmith back out to change the locks.
That would amount to probably a breach of protection from Eviction Act. Actually, that's brutal.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That's not a good thing to do. Like, that could open you up to all sorts of liability. Yeah, you don't want to be rocking up to a property you don't own and changing the locks.
Yeah, but apparently this guy had done it several times, but on actually vacant properties. No one was there, no one was going there.
Yeah.
And managed to hit this one where, you know, they were going to be gone in a month's time, or there or thereabouts. But they were still living there.
Yeah.
And it really does destroy the quiet enjoyment of the property clause in the AST. And exacerbates.
That's really cheeky, because if they did like a video walkthrough, it must have been evident that there was people there as well, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, for most of these things, most properties normally have items still in there, and then the owner will empty the property, or if it's a hovel, they won't empty the property. So it's not uncommon for there to be stuff.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Another one that comes across, talking of lease extensions, you've probably seen this, is that you'll have a property advertised in some of the auctions and they will have served the Section 42 notice. But I had a client I acted for, he bought a property in Chalk Farm and were exchange contracts for a property in Chalk Farm at a good price. He thought there was a Section 42 served at about 30 grand, but in reality, the premium was somewhere around 340,000 for it.
Wow.
So they served at 30. But the problem was, when I looked at it, I was like, well, for starters, it's way too low, far too low. But also, it's invalid. There's several reasons that this notice is invalid. So they've went and served it on the landlord. The landlord's a serious landlord. They're going to write back and argue that this notice is invalid. So he had already exchanged again without running it through us. And sure enough, the landlord writes back saying, yeah, notice is invalid for about 6 different reasons. And but we'll do a deal at £390,000 for the premium outside of the act, and you don't have to wait 2 years. And the client was like, well, what am I going to do now? And the difficulty is, a lot of these properties that are shifted through traders, etc., they will have all the disclaimers in the special conditions saying, well, don't rely on this Section 42. It's the worst Section 42 you'll ever see. It's not worth the paper it's written on. You're not going to be able to sue us, all the rest of it. So yeah, he was left with a bit of a lemon, basically.
Oh God.
Yeah.
There was a property about 3 years ago that some of our auction buyers club member wanted to buy. It was guided in the auction £100,000, and it was quite a massive property up in Cheshire, I think, Buxton. So basically, it was guided 100k, gigantic property, and there was a lot of capital allowances available to claim from that. It was like, I think, £400,000 capital allowances to be claimed, and our person was going to bid up to like £500,000, but anyway, the property went up for about 850,000. It was like a massive sale. And about 3 weeks ago, Jay sent us an article about this big Marks and Spencers being turned into a massive cannabis factory.
Yes.
It was quite a story.
I remember looking at that. It was huge.
It was massive.
Yeah,
it was massive.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And it was on the Daily Mail. It was on like all these different news outlets. And I was looking at the outside of the building going, I know this building. We definitely reviewed this building. And then we found that we did. And I was like, and it's huge.
It was that, but wasn't it on the high street as well? It was sort of quite
right.
That's
Yeah,
punchy, isn't it?
nice.
Yeah, that is. I don't know how they were. It was like a jungle, wasn't it? It's like, yeah.
Yeah. Once I got someone telling me that, asking me actually if this plant behind me, if this is my it's not.
Your own personal supply. Actually, just on that point, in Malta, I could have 4 behind me and still be legal. I'm allowed to grow 4 for my own personal uses, apparently. It's a new law this year. Not that I have done. But I was thinking, I'm going to say, it shows how much I don't know about this stuff. But when they grow, like plants have a smell. I know it wouldn't be the same smell as when you smoke it, but wouldn't there be a smell? Because that's a lot of plants in that space.
Well, I mean, talking about claiming capital allowances on a big commercial building that used to be a Marks and Spencer's, the amount of trunking, ventilation, electricity outlets that they put in,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. So they're very smart. What they can't do is they can't reduce the heat signature of the building.
Right.
Yeah, and that's normally because they've got so many lamps and stuff. Because you see the pictures, it's quite common to go through an auction catalog, see some internal images of what looks like a normal house, and you go in there and there are wires hanging from the ceiling.
Yeah.
There are all these lamps. There you can see where they've had the pots and all that stuff.
Yeah.
To be honest, I was tempted to try and grow one of these things just because I'm like a notorious plant killer. And I thought, oh, well, this could be a challenge for me. I like setting my own challenges. I'll try and grow, but they're really hard to grow, apparently. So I thought, I'm not backing a loser from the beginning. So I haven't tried.
Yeah, no, I can't add much to the cannabis, to how to grow cannabis plants. So.
Yeah, it's outside of my wheelhouse, actually. I've not got a clue.
But we recently actually got approached because we've got those light industrial workshops in Bristol, and we got approached. I put them on. One of them we still letting it out, and I put it on Facebook Marketplace. And on Facebook Marketplace, you get all kinds of people.
Oh, yeah.
And basically, I got this guy sending us a message saying, would you be open to rent this for a cabbage factory? You know what I mean?
You said yes.
So I said not really. No, I don't even respond to things like that. You don't want to get into some of the conversations on Facebook Marketplace. It's a
You
dark
try
place.
Facebook dating. Whoa, that's a whole new level of crazy. Let's not go there.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I just kind of wonder, like, what's obviously, like, you deal with the litigation and stuff, so you deal with things normally when things already are fairly what do you call it, like advanced, and they're already in a bad place, right?
Yeah.
But what would you say, like, are the top 3 things that people can do, like, in advance of an auction that will kind of protect them?
Well, I think definitely start with reading the legal pack. Will be even yourself. You know what some clients will do if they're, and some auction buyers club members even last week were doing this. I think if they're pretty serious about putting in bids, they will get one of the conveyancers or the transactional guys to have a look through the legal pack first of all, especially if they're the slightly more on, if it's being sold by a receiver, or if there's something unusual about rights of way or restrictive covenants, or if you're going to plan a redevelopment of some sort, it's probably worth checking or having somebody check through the legal documents, the title, the deeds, to ensure that there's not sort of an impediment. Go into possibly some planning consultants as well. I know people go to David Kemp or Charles Rose. There's a few. If it's a development angle that you're looking at, I think it's worth running those things by someone who's specialist in that area. Going to the actual property and having a look at it is probably a good idea. I think for some of the traders and people who are more experienced, they don't bother with going and viewing it. But for people who are sort of dipping their toe in or not doing it as regularly, if it's not that far away from you, then it's probably not the worst idea, because you can get some information about the profile of the tenants in there, or what the property's like, what the neighbors are like, and all the rest of it. I went to view one in Islington about a year ago, and it looked like a decent enough flat. I think I put it in the group at the time, but it had like quite a big metal door out the front of it. And even though it was in a good location, I was wondering what's with the metal door? And then directly opposite the house or the flat was a drug users rehabilitation center. So that was I think the reason for the lower price, but it's worth the trip, worth going along to see it first of all.
Yeah, it's like
would be a red
incredible what you can see when you actually do a field trip, especially like with auction properties, because usually like something ends up in the auction because it couldn't sell before, or like it struggled to sell before, and then it's like going and seeing the property really gives you an idea of why something might not have sold before.
George, you mentioned something there. See, doing deals pre or post auction, or even underwrites, the stuff that's not just the bog standard. You've already entered into the contract and the hammer falls. It's worth ensuring that the actual contract is clear and that the other side have entered into a binding contract, because if it gets into the situation of just back and forth emails or calls and you're doing a deal by that method, it gets into a slightly more gray area about what the terms of the deal are and whether a binding agreement has actually been entered into. So especially if it's a good deal you're just doing, you probably just want it on the standard auction terms and you want the other side to agree, clearly and explicitly that's the case, or even get them to actually sign them, just to avoid, because for a litigator, it's sort of fertile ground to try and duck and dive. And, if you're wanting to try and avoid selling something or buying something, then that gives you more of an opportunity to do it. So I think having the certainty of what you're entering into at the time is a good idea in those sort of more unusual creative deals.
So from a solicitor perspective, like how much time is needed before the auction? Is like 24 hours enough?
Possibly not. Somebody called up, I think it was last week, someone wanted that, and it can be tricky because it depends on the availability of the solicitors. If they've got a lot on, that's the risk. So if you're really interested in a property and you're thinking I'm going to bid quite well on it, then I would try and get it into the solicitors beforehand. Although I know I don't know why they do this, but sometimes the legal packs don't come out until very close to the auction anyway, so you're not left with much of a chance. One other one that comes up, even with traders and people who are more experienced, is issues where a buyer fails to complete, even after a notice to complete is served. Sometimes people will want to do a nice thing and not be too harsh and let the thing rumble on and give them a bit more time and all the rest of it. But that can create issues for if you're selling at auction, that can create issues because once a notice to complete is served, you would have a right at that point to either rescind the contract and terminate it or treat it as ongoing and effectively affirm the contract. So sometimes if you've got a buyer who's messing about, then you may want to just terminate that contract because otherwise, if you don't and the contract's affirmed and then 3 weeks down the line or a month down the line, they're still messing about, you may well have lost your opportunity to terminate the contract at the time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I think trying at least speak to somebody beforehand and have clear terms upon which you're going to permit anybody to have any further time following a notice to complete. Most times you will just rescind, forfeit the deposit, but some of the sort of nicer and softer souls out there give a bit more time, but it can create issues then for themselves.
Well, I think we had this situation a couple of times, and in one of the situation, the seller, so basically on the advice of the solicitors, they actually served the notice, and then after the notice expired, they like terminated the contract, but the buyers were still like in the game. So basically, what we told them is, if you want this property, you can buy it again, and possibly we could entertain a lower price, but it would be a new contract.
Exactly.
And basically, it would be like take into account some of the deposit from the past and stuff, but it would be like a new contract to make things clear. And it actually did work out a couple of times. So.
Yeah, that's the right way to do it.
Right.
Because then you've got yourself in a position of leverage. You don't have to do it. You can be nice if you want, but at least from a legal perspective, you're
clean.
protected. Yeah, it's clean.
So what was it like, for example, like if you being nice and then you didn't terminate the contract after the 10-day notice? Can you like, and then I don't know, 3 weeks later things is still going on? Can you serve the notice again, or can you like what's their way of finishing things, or is it going in perpetuity like forever?
Exactly. Well, you've made, but by serving the notice in the first place, you've made time of the essence. So then at the point when that, say, let's say 5 days has run out, you've then got the opportunity to terminate and rescind the contract. Then the question would be, well, if you don't rescind the contract at that point when you had the opportunity, I guess it would just continue on the same terms as it was before. And then you'd have to look at the terms of the contract to check, well, can you then serve a fresh notice after serving an initial notice? And I don't know, usually I'm not sure that the standard auction conditions cater for a second notice to complete. So I'm not sure you can keep having bites of the cherry and serving notice to complete after notice to complete. And some more experienced buyers or traders who do that sort of stuff will take advantage of those types of scenarios, because then they're in a slightly, oddly, a much better position, because so I sort of would avoid that. Another one which comes up sometimes, which is a bit messy, is rights of first refusal, because
The freehold sales.
yeah, freehold sales and right of first refusal, because sometimes the notices that are done can be done wrong, or sometimes transactional lawyers may think that a notice isn't required, when in fact a notice may have been required because they've missed something in the profile of the building or in the act, because it's quite a specialist area, right of first refusal. So a lot of transactional lawyers will be used to dealing with the transactional elements, and you won't want to spend days working out whether or not the 1987 Act may apply. And so I've had clients who have unluckily inherited properties where the conveyancer had thought, they exchanged contracts prior without solicitors, but then the conveyancer thought as well, yeah, this is fine. I don't think notices need to be served. And the tenant comes out of the woodwork, or tenants come out of the woodwork afterwards and say, well, actually, I'm now going to try and purchase the freehold interest because it should have been offered to me first.
And that's a typical example, is it? Sorry, I've not come across that before, where it would be most relevant to somebody that's in situ already, and they get the right of first refusal to buy it if they're.
Yeah, so exactly, yeah, the residential tenant. So it could even be a mixed-use building, but the resis on the upper floor are, they qualify for right of first refusal and say, well, actually, we should have been offered this because of X, Y, and Z. It's happened a couple of times.
Interesting.
So I've seen it in the past, David, where someone's trying to sell the freehold without serving the Section 5 notices. And the argument they make is they're not selling the freehold, they're selling the company that owns the freehold. Yeah,
that is a potential workaround with that, because there's not an actual transfer of the property itself. There's not a relevant disposal for the purposes of the 1987 Act. So that can potentially be a way around it. But there's a lot of other instances where people will think, for example, that piece of legislation was brought in just before Margaret Thatcher, I think, won the election in 1988, and it was rushed through, and it's a bad piece of legislation, and it doesn't properly cater for. There should be lots of exceptions to that act applying, but they aren't listed as exceptions. So, and then the difficulty is breaching the act is technically a criminal offence. So it does have consequences, both criminal, albeit it's I'm not aware of any, haven't actually been prosecuted, but it also provides the leaseholders with the opportunity to take that freehold interest that you may have purchased in good faith potentially. Even for example, an example of it is sometimes the creation of long commercial leases, that type of stuff. So you would think, well, there's no reason why the grant of a long commercial lease would be triggered by the 1987 Act, but there's argument about it both way, which is you shouldn't really have with an act like that. You should have certainty.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a slight grey area, and you want to have someone look at that if the premises is one which potentially falls within the remit of the 1987 Act, then it's probably worth somebody having a look at it.
Yeah. Well, this conversation about cannabis has sparked.
Yeah, I see that.
No questions or comments. It's clearly a lively conversation out there. I won't bring up some of the comments teaching people how to grow cannabis, but yeah.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Craig, for your input. Thank you, Richard. Yeah.
Brilliant. We have got a comment from Guy Jarrison. Good to see you, Guy.
Hi, Guy. Morning, Guy.
So, buyer fails to complete, I advise seller to issue notice on the day of completion and keeps the upper hand. If possible, pay for further extension. Rare, but it can happen. Agree to be careful. Section 5. The issue is not all lawyers understand the nuances of Section 5 notices.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing how many of those horror stories happen in the auctions on a daily basis.
There's a lot of them. Oh, do you know what one recently? It was somebody. It's another Auction Buyers Club member, but we had one where I think they were about to lose out on a sale. You might have been at a birthday party yesterday regarding this person, Jay. But anyway, about to lose out on a sale on a purchase, a property they had exchanged contracts to purchase, and then because the completion date and the notice to complete was calculated by the sellers as being the Monday. And then they sent on the stuff to us and asked us whether there's any argument, whether we could extend or make an argument that the completion date was further along. And I think, as you know, it was a Friday that was due to fall on. And we said, well, we looked at it, gave advice. I think did a letter saying, well, actually, no, if you look at all of this, the correct completion date should be the Monday or the Tuesday afterwards. And so it got them just enough time to complete the deal, to find the money to complete the deal. And so he was saying to me at the last Auction Buyers Club, he said, oh, you saved me $100,000. I was like, how much did I charge you for that letter? It was me and Jack, but definitely not enough. But yeah, so if you are really up against it and you need a few days, there might be an argument on notice to completes, because that's another thing. Possibly it's quite standard that there may be an issue with the validity of the notice, or maybe something you can do if it's a day or two extra will allow you to fund the deal.
Wow.
Brilliant. Well, I guess the only way to protect yourself from those horror stories is to actually have a bit of a team around you that is kind of looking out for the possible issues in contracts and legal packs, and also sometimes it's important to know who you're buying the property from, because you can expect certain sellers to act in a certain way, even if there's nothing like two owners in the contract, they may still act in a certain way. I remember like some buyers, like who also quite regular sellers in auctions, if they buy a property I almost always expect they're gonna come up with some sort of thing saying like, "Oh, we can't complete on this. We want longer completion, and we want to pay less deposit," even though the contract is super clear. But the way they will make those demands is rather intimidating to the buyers, and they might be like, "Oh, maybe these people are right, maybe this and that," and people tend to kind of lose their ground. So it's important to know where you stand with things and with certain buyers and sellers.
Yeah. Joe, you help, I think, Piotr and Jay actually just in the Auction Buyers Club with some of the stuff you do, because usually if they're, well, Jay will probably know who's selling the property and will say, "Oh, well, I know this person, X, Y, and Z." Or you, I find it quite funny, Piotr, sometimes where you will be like, "Well, no, this property's crap. Why are you wasting my time? Why am I having to look at this property?" in your brutal manner that you do. You probably see of people from buying a lot of crap properties in your time.
Oh, God,
yeah. Jay is still teaching me how to be more subtle with those things.
We love it. We want Polish.
Yeah, but cool. There's a comment from Lee Gao. Best auction property I want to see was a flat, but bathroom room belonged to next door and was not on lease. Got sold to a lady that never had auction park. Great nuggets in this week's episode.
Oh my gosh! So it didn't have a bathroom. Okay.
Wow.
Well, I think there's quite a lot of leases like this, and on Edgware Road, like those properties towards the Maida Vale side of Edgware Road. A lot of the leases are very, I would say, not matching with the reality and not matching with land registry, and there's a lot of issues with those things. But yeah, well, I think it's time to wrap up the chat for today. I think it's enough of horror stories for Sunday morning before breakfast. But basically, we're doing an auction workshop on Thursday and Friday this coming week. We still have a few places left if anyone wants to jump in at the last moment. And if you're listening to this chat and you are a super fan, we might even give a special offer. But you need to message us about it. We don't reveal it publicly, but go to this website, quick.hammeredauctions.co.uk, and there's a button for the auction workshop. Let us know if you want to attend, if you want to save yourself from some of those horror stories.
Well worth the investment. Yeah. There's just so many nuances, isn't there? It's opened my eyes even more. So
go ahead. I was just going to say before you go as well that I've got to say how impressed I am that I was trying to brag about being in the ice bath this morning, and Helen Chorley's just told me that she spends 5 times as long. And she asked me, "How long do you spend?" And I was like, 3 minutes. She goes, "Oh, that's good, David. That's good." I was, "How long do you spend, Helen?" And she's like, 16 minutes. So I'm like, "Oh, okay." I got embarrassed.
Not that we're competitive or anything, David.
No.
we had a good chat about ice baths. Maybe that could be we can get that in
a whole other
next
topic.
Week. Buying property with ice baths. How much premium that adds to your property.
Yeah.
You've got your own ice bath. That's super impressive.
But you're just still spending 5 times as long in yours. That's even more embarrassing.
Yeah, I thought I was I was quite brave swimming in the Atlantic Ocean in 14 degrees, but no, nothing.
No, you're not.
Nothing comparing to that. That sounds like boiling water.
3 degrees is quite punchy. Actually, I'm in Porto at the moment. I'm by the beach, so I was gonna go and try it, but yeah, I'm used to the water in Malta at the moment. It's still like mid-20s. I'm not sure I'm quite ready for sea, but see.
Nice.
Oh well, it's been a brilliant chat, David. Thank you so much for joining us.
No, thanks for inviting me on. It's been great.
Replacing Adam. It's not an easy task, but
I know, yeah.
No. Extremely well. It's great. All the stories you shared. and
Thanks.
hopefully it won't put you in trouble.
I'm also impressed at how professional Jay is given his hangover as well. It's like you could never tell.
Thanks for outing me live on air, David. That's stunning behaviour. You're a real gentleman.
You should say happy birthday to Dom. Happy 50th, Dom.
should.
Oh, happy
say.
birthday, Dom.
Not that
Yeah,
I guess he's not watching live today. Bless him.
No, I
Yeah.
don't think he would be, but I'm sure he will watch on the replay at some
Yeah.
point within next week. Brilliant. So got a bit of a comment from Rakiba. Good to see you, Rakiba.
Oh,
So
hi,
Rakiba is
Rakiba.
main person behind RFB. So
Exactly. Yeah.
brilliant. Cool. All right, guys. Have a great Sunday, and we'll see you on